Call her at
48% of Americans.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you so much.
To them that a black woman
Thank you.
be the next Supreme Court justice. According to the Associated Press NORC poll, just 29% think it's extremely or very important. But among Black Americans, the president's promise is resonating. 63% of Black Americans say it's very or extremely important, compared to just 21% of white Americans and 33% of Hispanics. The numbers are much higher among Black women. 70% place high importance on a Black female Supreme Court justice. There's also a political divide. Most Democrats think it's at least somewhat important, but 8 in 10 Republicans do not. I'm Jackie Quinn.
And I'm Rita Foley, AP News.
This is 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now, your WCPT 820 Chicago traffic update.
Most of the Chicago expressways are in pretty good shape right now. We've had a little lake effect snow. We do have delays, however, on the outbound Eisenhower from North Avenue to before York Road. A crash there had 2 right lanes blocked. Looks like we're getting a little more clearing through that area. The trip time has come down from 28 to 26 minutes from downtown Chicago to 390. The inbound travel time is 24 minutes. The inbound hike still looks good. On the Kennedy, from O'Hare to downtown, it's 17 minutes. Outbound, it's 19. On the Stevenson, inbound traffic's a little heavy now, Pulaski to Kedzie. 23 minutes from the Veterans Memorial Tollway to DuSable Lakeshore Drive, out on 22. And on Ryan, delay start at Roosevelt. I'm Jim Talamonte.
The Tom Hartman radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars.
Okay,
Weekdays,
she's at
11 to
7
2,
a.m.,
right here on
okay?
WCPT
I'm going to put that on
820,
here.
Chicago.
All right, sounds good.
Okay.
Facts matter.
18. That's how many
Okay,
cars
let's
we currently
get a
have
sound
on the
check
lot.
on Pastor
18.
Brooks.
This is TJ from McCarthy Ford, and you've probably heard about the crazy shortages that car dealers are facing.
Okay, Pastor Brooks, can you hear us?
Chip the size of a quarter. Thousands of vehicles are languishing in factory parking lots.
Sound fantastic.
Just one more example of how COVID-19.
And we've got, about 45 seconds.
Fantastic.
Cars,
Thank you.
trucks, SUVs aren't the only thing reliant on those chips. Laptops, notebooks, cell phones, everything we use every day relies on silicon-based semiconductor chips, and there's a backup never before seen. So
All right, 30 seconds now. Sorry about that.
No these vehicles urgently. What does this mean for you? We're paying top dollar, and we're making quick deals. Stop by our store at the corner of 115th and Pulaski Road, and we'll do a quick evaluation of your vehicle, and you might leave with a hefty check in your pocket. Please call 773-239.
All right, 10 seconds.
Okay.
McCarthy Ford wants your car.
This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is a joy to be with you today on a really tough day. It seems that the war has started in Ukraine. Russia, where will the United States and NATO fall in? We're going to be talking about that throughout the show today. I want to hear your thoughts. 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. That's WCPT. And I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. But really, we're watching these days on my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. So please, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And thank you for your overwhelming response to the article, this little tidbit that I did in People magazine last week. And with Newsy, we've been getting quite a response to that. And I'll continue to post that as you all have requested. Wonderful interview with Lauren Magarino, and with Devin Lieberman. He, of course, was the cameraman, but he was kind of helping to keep things together. And my glam squad, Joseph Hampton. Love you all, love you all. Wonderful, wonderful. They're wonderful young journalists. Lauren Magarino and Devin Lieberman. Wonderful, wonderful. And of course, I thank Newsy for recognizing these trailblazers in civil rights and their daughters who were in attendance. We're going to be talking about the C2U Forum that I'm going to be hosting tonight. Thank you, Commissioner Brandon Johnson and CTU, Stacey Davis, and Gates and everybody over there. We're going to be talking about education and where Black history fits in to that. Because it really is American history. We're going to be talking about that tonight. It will be live. It will be live. And so you can check that out. And we're going to be talking about a forum that Push Excel will be having today on preserving the culture. On preserving the culture. A lot of people want to know how we're going to deal with race and racism in the American education system. You can't have education in America without dealing with all of that. This is all part of who we are. So, everybody, let's talk about Ukraine today. Let's talk about these vaccine mandates that are being lifted. The COVID restrictions are being lifted. No need for vaccine, no vaccine requirements, no need for masks. That is happening right now in the biggest cities in the United States. Even in New York City, the mayor is considering. He said, I'm looking forward to the day that I can roll that back. What is that going to mean? What is that going to mean? And how should you live? And what about our voting rights as we are about to make the pilgrimage down to Selma next weekend? The challenge that we're finding is that more and more of us are losing access to the vote, and we really need to think about that. Shirley, everybody, Dave is already on YouTube, Joyce, everybody to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Meet Dave Dowling over there and Samantha. All right, Daryl and Mark and Paula, sending you all much love today. Let's get to some of these headlines so we can get to the rest of the show and start off with some good news with Pastor Darius Brooks, everybody. Russian forces have begun their attack on Ukraine with reports of troops crossing the border from multiple directions and explosions in several cities. There have been reports of several deaths. We're still trying to confirm that, including the capital, Kiev. Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned of bloodshed unless Ukrainian forces lay down their arms. We'll be talking about that today because I think there's a lot that we do not know about the Russian-Ukrainian connection. So we'll just have to see how that all goes, everybody. I want you to call me or text me at 773-763-9278. Canada is now sending troops over there. So this is going to be a pretty widely spread conflict. And American troops are already in Poland, which is right there. And so we're going to have to see. It's like they're one shot away from having a real full-scale conflict. Many people have said that we haven't seen anything like this since the Second World War. So we'll see how all of this goes, everybody. The CDC is expected to make an announcement as early as tomorrow about new metrics that will guide COVID-19 restrictions, such as mask wearing. Current guidance says people who live in counties with substantial or high levels of COVID-19 transmission should wear masks indoors. While this will not change, the CDC says it will adjust the way it assesses, quote, community levels of disease. Pastor Darius Brooks, how you doing this morning? Come on, give us some good news. It's always a joy to hear your voice on Thursday mornings.
I was listening to your progressive talk phrase where facts matter. And I said, wow, that is crazy amazing. Santita at Great Central, we have a sign when you walk in the door and go out, and it says, character counts here.
Absolutely.
Character counts here. And so whatever we're doing in our lives, no matter what's happening, God's word creates a character in us as individuals that no matter what we see on the outside, we know what his direction says on the inside. Jeremiah 29:12 says, then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen. You will seek me and find me when you search for me with your whole heart. And if I had to use my thoughts, Santita, I'd share with somebody today, God is here for when we explore. God is here for when we explore. To resist or receive is a decision we make every day. Nothing dies quicker than a new idea and a closed mind. God's word, when we really desire and use it and get into it. It's always designed for a better life. Never be so stuck that you cannot afford to pay attention to explore God's word, even when we know what we know. Availability is the greatest ability we have if we ever want to see things differently and better, looking at something. Be weak at reaching to God's word, because when you faith in God, your back is turned away from crazy, and all you see is the faith that you have in God to assist you in overcoming danger. Never, ever give up the control that God gives us in and for our lives. But see, I say often, God is not in control. God is in charge. But he gives us the control to trust him so he can charge this thing. To anything, don't ever give your control to anything but faith in and through God's word. Explore means to travel in or through, or in order to learn something more or familiarize yourself with something more to oneself. Make a decision to resist or receive, and you will see the evidence of God everywhere or nowhere by how you position yourselves to see him. Santita, our walk with God begins with the command, trust me, and ends with the command, go. When we use the command, trust me, then go, we'll explore. God's word lights its own fire and burns off anything that ain't like God. When we explore, God shows us a creative idea that's waiting to be released. Choose to explore God's word. It's a decision that determines one's heart's desire. God is here for when we explore.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Pastor Darius Brooks of the Grace Central Community Church. Indeed, you are serving food. Just very quickly, how can we, if we're hungry, how can we come and where should we come to get food at your church?
So first, it's Grace Central.
Excuse me.
But we do serve the community. I don't want anybody looking for Grace Central Community.
Excuse
it's
me.
Grace Central Church. 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois. It's right off of 290 in Manheim and Hillside. We every Tuesday from 5 till 7, and even on Wednesdays for seniors from noon till 2. We're excited about it. We're doing a build out. My wife Santita is crazy amazing. I looked at her yesterday. I'm trying to go to lunch with her. She's like, "No, I got to get to the food pantry. No, I got to get to the food pantry." Mm-hmm. And God, I said to myself in the car, "Now this is crazy." And God said, "Really? How many people do you know love serving?"
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what's the address again? And the days, the day or the days that we can get food there?
10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois. 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois. Tuesdays from 5 till 7 and Wednesday from noon till 2.
Okay, everybody, because a lot of people are really hungry out here. I mean, literally are hungry. And so we are so grateful to you. And how can we get in touch with you so that we can make a contribution and help you as you help us?
GraceCentral.net, info@GraceCentral.net. You can cash app us, $ Grace Central Church, and you can mail it. 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois, or call me. I'll come get it.
Okay, and guess what? And you are worshiping in person on Sundays at what time?
10:30 till noon, and Tuesday from 7 till 8.
All right, everybody. Grace Central Church. Grace Central Church, everybody, with the magnificent Darius Brooks, Pastor Darius Brooks. Yes, that Darius Brooks. Your will is what's best for me. Safe in his arms. All of these great iconic songs that have lifted us and keep us going. We love you, Pastor Darius Brooks. Let's get to doctors. Deborah Verholden, epidemiologist, and, of course, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University School of Medicine, our health guru here right on the Santita Jackson Show, who's brought to us this infection preventionist, brilliant research scholar at Case Western Reserve University, registered nurse as well, Dr. Shanina Knighton. Let's get right to it, ladies. Of course, yes, I'm taking your calls. We're going to talk about Ukraine, and we're talking about our voting rights, too, because they are being snatched away while we're at war. We're also losing our voting rights. Dave Daly will be with us at 6:40 to talk about that. But let's talk about all of these cities, even the biggest city in the United States, Dr. Verholden, Mayor Adams, who has been a staunch advocate of getting vaccinated and these COVID restrictions. He's talking about ending them now. He's talking about ending that, even as we watch a lot of big companies who have vaccine mandates. I'm wondering, how will all of this hold up? How are we going to ask, of course, uh, Dr. Dr. Shanita Knighton, what exactly we should be doing. But in terms of policy, what do you think about this? Because you have a lot of companies, Dr. Verholden, who have mandated Apple, AT&T, DoorDash, Facebook, Ford, GE, Google, IBM, McDonald's, et cetera, et cetera. Like the biggest companies in the United States have mandated, they have these restrictions, and yet we didn't really see them on the planes, but you saw them with the employees. Where is this going, Dr. Verholden? Is this over now?
Pretty clear. Well, I wouldn't say it's over. I would say people are over COVID.
Oh,
that's for sure. Okay. Everybody's over COVID. It's like a drag, right? Like this was. I think about yeah. My daughter said this was supposed to be like the bird flu. It was not like the bird flu though. Yeah. So what we're going to see more of is these going to be peeling back these restrictions. And honestly, people are trying to show data like, oh, the places that even had this stricter, sort of rules that look too different. And there's just so much noise and mess in our ability to, really speak powerfully about what things really are supporting mitigation. The problem is some of the very basic things that we should have just institutionalized during this pandemic, we did not. And should we have institutionalized mask wearing? No. Right? We are going to live in a world where we're masked for the rest of our days. Although I will tell you, if we are at ever a peak season or a surge of a infectious disease again, I would likely mask myself going indoors because I see value in that. Mm-hmm. But as a rule, as a policy across the nation, all of these things are going to be peeled back. It wouldn't surprise me if within the next 2 to 3 weeks we see almost zero restrictions in the U.S.
2 to 3 weeks?
People can pretend all they want. And in the next 2 to 3 weeks, I would eventually guess they'll be gone everywhere. I'm in Baltimore physically right now, and I'm looking at their mayor grapple with what they're going to do. And he's been holding the media at bay. It was the funniest interview. And he said, I'm talking to the head of the health department. I can't give you an answer until I talk to her. So then they fast forward to the next day. He said he was talking to her that day. They fast forward to the next day. Are you going to be, pulling the mask mandates back and some other things? He said, I've already told you people, I don't have the answer to that, so I talked to the health commissioner. And it's like, well, you told us yesterday you were talking to her yesterday. When are you talking to her? I'm talking to her today. So I will see what he says today. I think what it is you've got places where people have a very high conscience about the health and the safety of their people, and they don't want to be the leader who peel things back and then things broke out, and that potentially has some backlash for them. But then you got other places. Look at Florida. They were in peak transmission, and they had so little in place. And that governor, in my opinion, has thousands and thousands of deaths on his hands. But he doesn't see it that way. And even though his approval ratings tanked during that period, now that they're out of that season, they're creeping right back up. It's like people have very short memory when it comes to this stuff. So I don't agree that most of what we did is why the transmission is down. I think this is just the natural course of this disease. It spread like wildfire, the Omicron variant, and then it sort of burns itself out. It affects a lot of people, and then it burns itself out. I think, honestly, in my opinion, that's what happened.
Well, let me ask you this.
The mitigation strategies that we used made the difference.
Well, let me ask you this just very quickly before we shift over to Dr. Knighton, because we need to know how we're supposed to live with this now. Because you said COVID-19 is now endemic. It's here. And it's still making people sick. It's still, I mean, and even when, because the vaccines wear off. they do, they just do so. I mean, my thing is, how do we mitigate this? I mean, before we talk to Dr. Knighton about exactly how we mitigate this, just in a minute, what are your thoughts?
Well, the big picture is first get your health up.
Mm.
And we talked a lot about what that means. Get your health up. And I do think people should get vaccinated. It's just certain things we don't have to deal with anymore because of vaccines. We don't deal with smallpox. We don't deal with measles. And the places where we get these, small and typically manageable outbreaks of them have been primarily in populations because of different reasons, the religion, mostly, where people, you have a large proportion of people who are unvaccinated. So get your health up. Do the things that you can that are in your hands to get your health up. People do need to get vaccinated, I believe, and people should probably get ready for this vaccination. Will likely be seasonal, and that seasonal vaccine might include a booster.
Is there anything that they can do to make it even more effective so you don't have to take as many boosters? I mean, is that work that's being done? Because at first, unless it was J&J, you had to get 2. Then they said 3. Now they're saying 4. Is there anything that can be done to make these shots more robust? I mean,
that's what's happening. But it's the same way people were all afraid and up in arms over this silly name thing called Operation Warp Speed. Mm-hmm. There's a process for all of this. And just because we have these FDA-approved vaccines doesn't mean that now those same manufacturers get to come back and produce something and bypass that process. They still have to go through that whole process of ongoing, and so most of these studies are ongoing, the ongoing clinical trials testing, the ongoing vaccine development and testing of those vaccines in human populations. So we're going to see that. We're going to see a second generation of vaccines that will be better. Exactly how they're better, we'll see.
Okay.
The vaccines that we have, unfortunately, aren't the best solution to a global crisis because they have all these, cold chain storage problems. That created problems for us in the beginning in getting them even to more remote and isolated parts of this country. So I think what we can expect is to see a whole lot of improvement and new innovation coming out with the future generation of COVID vaccines. But I think that's what people can do. And if people didn't know, they need to identify and find for themselves their trusted and credible sources of information. Because all of the misinformation and all of the poor ways that information about this pandemic, about this, virus, about this vaccine and all of that, the just very poor ways those things were communicated, I think, only fueled people's frustration. It fueled people's mistrust of the vaccine. It kept some people in the dark with respect to resources that were actually available. It had some people overestimate what was available and things like that. So, people need to get their health up, including getting the vaccine. People need to get their, information channels and their sources of trusted and credible information solidified for themselves. And then, they just need to practice these very basic things that we've all learned now and talked about that will protect them, pretty much in the face of whatever is happening around them. I do know that the power of mass is when everybody has them on, or the majority of people. They lose their effectiveness when, as the percentage of people in a space that are using them goes down. And so I don't know. I hope that people are also looking at what's happening globally and understanding what it looks like in countries where they really did have a more robust, unified, national, coordinated response. And then maybe the next round we'll get it right or do it better than we did this time.
So we will see. When we come back, we're going to talk to Dr. Shanita Knighton about what we should be doing, how we should be conducting ourselves as we move into this new into this new moment. I mean, COVID-19 and Delta and Omicron and all these other subvariants and variants, they're out here. And so are other diseases, so what should we be doing to protect ourselves, to mitigate the spread, the contraction of this virus and the spreading of it, because you can still spread it, whether you're vaccinated or not. So we've got to stop all of that. I've got 6:40. We're going to be talking with David Daly about our voting rights, even as we are fighting for democracy and liberty all over the world. We don't quite have it here. So we've got to talk about that with David Daly about that as we're going into the Selma Jubilee, and education is on everyone's mind. How do we teach American history? I will be hosting a forum tonight for the Chicago Teachers Union as we talk about Black history. And how can you discuss America without discussing Black people? How can you discuss America without discussing Indigenous people and what really happened to them? You can't. Otherwise, it's not history. It's your opinion, your thoughts, and you're not telling the truth. And then we'll be talking about Ukraine. I want to take your thoughts. I want to take your calls about that throughout the show. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. And Carmelita, I'd love to hear from you, because I've taken some incoming fire from people about my position on peace. I have not praised Putin, but I do like to have a global view of what happens, of how we get places, because we're very selective about whom we defend, about whose liberties we uphold. When Black people were struggling in South Africa, when colored people and Indian people were struggling in South Africa, we just let them get killed. And even when President Mandela was president, he was still on the U.S. terrorist list. Think about that. Think about that. Think about that. Think about that. Think about how Dr. King was treated past his death. Think about that. Think about that. Think about Du Bois, W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the finest intellectuals produced in the history of the United States. He died in exile in Africa. Think about that. Think about Paul Robeson having to go to Russia for freedom. Think about that. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. All right. Dr. Furholden, thank you so much. I'm going to come right to Dr. Knighton. Oh boy, let me pull this up. I'm going to come right to her. And then we will get out at 6:40, 7:40 your time. Because I've got to excuse me, something just came in for me. So how are you doing, ladies? We heard India. Everybody's excited to hear her always.
Oh, yes, she's doing her thing right now. That sounds like a dot matrix print.
Oh, it is, huh? And I'm getting an office printer, which I did not want to get because they're so big and bulky. And this is still, I'm going to do something out because this is like looking like half of an office. I've lost my dining room. I'm like, how am I supposed to? Things have got to change, and that is what I'm looking to do because I gotta have my home back. But I like doing the show from here. But I'm gonna have to, move things around so that I can have my home back, so that I can have dinner properly.
Yeah.
Properly have dinner, like set the table, because I always do that. I set the table and all of that. Otherwise it's like you're at camp. I'm like, I don't like that. And I don't like, I don't like TV tables. I don't like that. I don't like that. Even though I just think about my granddaddy, he used to love to get his snack with his TV table in his favorite chair after we'd eaten. Oh my goodness, he's been on my mind so much lately. I think whenever I see these European conflicts, I think about him. The last time I saw him alive, I was 15. And he did something, Deborah and Shanina, that I'd never seen him do. He was always, granddaddy's kind of jolly, fun, blah, blah, blah. But just as my father was about to leave and my Uncle Saint, they were about to get on the plane. And my brothers and I and my sister, my baby sister, we were going to be down there just a few more days. And my grandfather started talking about the Second World War. It can make me cry when I think about it. And he talked about how badly the black soldiers were treated. How they were sent into Auschwitz and Buchenwald to get the Holocaust survivors. They were honored to do that because they couldn't send the white soldiers in because the Holocaust survivors would have thought they were Nazis. But even if they were wearing American uniforms, they just would not have trusted them. But those death camps were laden. The Nazis left landmines all over the death camps. So a lot of those black soldiers walked in and they were killed. No one tells that story. And my grandfather was just broken up about it. And he said, he said, baby, you never want war. And I remembered it just a few days ago. He talked about the horrors of war. He talked about that. Oh my goodness. So I just pray for everybody over there today. But I pray for there are wars going on all over the world, everybody. And so I'm going to passionately pray for peace. Passionately, and work toward it. I'm going to work toward it. And I do want to understand everyone's position. Because my parents did not jump on a side with their children.
30 seconds.
They knew who we were, how we behaved, and they would want to hear from everybody what happened. And that's what I want to do. I don't make assumptions. And I certainly don't make assumptions about a media that lies on black people and brown people and women all the time. We're lazier.
Yeah.
I mean, everything we do is wrong. We're the ones who are the criminals.
10 seconds.
Please. So let's get right to it, Shanina. We're going to get to you and everybody call me. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Thursday, February 24th, 2022. Tonight, I'll be hosting an event for the Chicago Teachers Union talking about Black people and American history. How do we figure into it? How do you teach it? How do we teach our children? And then, of course, Operation Push, Rainbow Push, we'll be doing something similar to that tonight as well. And so we're going to have Dr. Sonia Whitaker at the top of the hour to talk to us for a couple of minutes about that. Dave Daly will be speaking with us about these voting rights that are being peeled back, everybody. They are, and it's stripping Black voters specifically, Black and Latino voters. But it's really wreaking havoc in the Black community, and we've got to talk about that. And then, of course, Ukraine. So, everybody, let's get right to it. Dr. Shanina Knighton, help us. I mean, how are we supposed to function in this world where we have COVID-19? It's still here, and whatever it's evolved into. How do we protect ourselves?
Good morning. So I think one of the biggest things is, and we've been told this since the beginning of time, we've been told this, is a child, and that is making sure that we are conscious about our hand hygiene, making sure that we are conscious about the company that we're keeping, the spaces that we may dwell in terms of people being crowded, determining whether or not we are indoors or outdoors will be the main things that I could emphasize. So surface touching, hand hygiene, and being aware of if you are inside or outside and if it is crowded. Reason being is like many of us are going to have changes. We have to realize that psychologically as well as physically, we have adapted our masks to being our watches almost, to being our cell phones, where they have become innately a part of some people's mindset. And so what we're getting ready to encounter as policies change and a lot of things drop is going to be how well do we adjust to each other with still being able to keep up individual rights and individual practices. So, for example, for someone getting ready to go, let's say, to a concert, being aware
mindset wise that before you buy your ticket, there are going to be others there. It's going to be crowded, and you may be around people that may not wear a mask. If you are still one of those individuals that, let's say, are immunocompromised, you are still considered to have multiple chronic conditions and being at risk for COVID, you just have to think through, I have a decision whether or not I'm going to buy a ticket and if this makes sense. Because what we're going to see is there will be individuals there that will be doing what it is that they want to do. Even still, in some areas where I have seen the mask guidelines be relaxed, I'm seeing people walking around and I can honestly see the droplets coming out of their mouth when they're coughing. So they have no awareness of what it is that they're doing, and automatically I'm turned off and don't want to eat, right? Same thing like with workplace. People are getting ready to go back to work and guidelines are getting ready to change at employers. So if you're working at a cubicle, the first thing that I'm going to do is make environmental services my best friend. Are you cleaning out? How does the HVAC system work? So how does the heating, ventilation, air conditioning system work? Do we have air exchanges from outside air? I'm concerned about being in the space, with people that are in their cubicles and they're unmasked. Then what that comes down to is making sure the individuals are not discriminated against for wearing masks or for not wearing masks. And so these are not conversations that we are having yet, but they are going to be very essential as time comes, because you are going to find, that there is going to be some unfortunate retaliation for the characteristic or for what people decide that they're going to do. I would also be checking for what's happening environmental cleaning, meaning at some of the places that you tend to dwell or go, are they keeping up their cleaning practices? Meaning that, yes, you may clean your hands, but are they emphasizing that, yes, we still do environmental cleaning? We're cleaning our buttons, we're cleaning our handles, we're cleaning, our furniture, or do things go back or lax to where we're having shared menus and shared condiments and things and settings, because these are the things that as individuals, we have to, again, incorporate our own infection prevention practices into our daily lives. So yes, things may not be as stressed, but I want to tell people this is not the time to practice willful blindness, where you are becoming, you want to ignore the problem. So the problem is happening, but it's easier to ignore it, so you think until it explodes. That's not what we want to do. You want to still make sure that, yes, if there is availability of tests, still doing your litmus checks, right? If you know that you've been around a group of people and you're saying to yourself, I may have COVID, take your test. Yes, it may be asymptomatic, but just as we know, there is such thing as COVID long hauling, which means that there may be symptoms later on down the line or something that you are unaware of. So I think it's very important, again, sanitize your hands, be aware of where you are in regards to indoor, outdoor, and if it's crowded. Make sure that environmental cleaning is happening. If they're not doing it, make sure you have your own disinfectant wipes if you are going to be using a commonly shared surface. And more so importantly, do your litmus check in regards to COVID and make sure that you are practicing prevention by having a primary care provider as well as listening to your body.
Ooh, you've had me holding my breath through the whole thing. But you're absolutely right. Because this is the only way that we're really going to be able to take care of ourselves. COVID has been a gift because it has helped us to see the things that we need to change about our health care practices. And we would not have any of this information were it not for you, Dr. Deborah Holton, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University School of Medicine, and you, Dr. Shanita Knighton, infection preventionist, registered nurse, research scholar at Case Western Reserve University, helping us to understand how we need to function. Everybody. Clean up after yourself, clean up before yourself, take care of yourselves, everybody, because guess what? Everything's opening right back up. That's it. That's all. Love you, Drs. Holden and Knighton. I will speak with you in the morning. We've got David Daly, the New York Times bestselling author of Rat Effed. That's right. Can't say it, but you sure need to read it. And Unrigged, everybody. The true story of the secret plan to steal our democracy. That's Rat Effed. And how Americans are battling back to save our democracy. That's Unrigged. Well, he's written a tremendous piece that is in CNN. That's on CNN.com right now. Politicians are stripping black voters of their votes in Congress. It is a compelling read as we see that the Alabama congressional map has been allowed to stand by the U.S. Supreme Court. And it's a disrespect, according to many allies of the Voting Rights Act. They say it's a complete slap in the face to the Voting Rights Act. But tell us about Alabama. I mean, because we are on our way down to Alabama for this Selma to Montgomery March pilgrimage. My father's been going for more than 50 years, and we'll be down there next weekend. And yet, now, as we are looking at war, what we're looking away from is the systematic stripping away of the black vote in particular. Black and Latino voters generally, which is awful. But it's hitting black voters particularly hard, David Daly.
You're absolutely right. Good morning, Santita.
Thank you.
It is, when people are talking about this redistricting cycle, there's been a lot of talk about how, well, Democrats didn't get hit as hard as they thought. They didn't lose maybe as many seats as people imagined they would. Perhaps the cycle has gone a little bit better for them. And it's true in some ways that the partisan context, the red versus blue of all of this, has been fought perhaps to something close to a draw. But when you look a little bit deeper, when you look at the impact of this on black voters, on communities of color nationwide, what you see is a nation that is becoming increasingly more multiracial, a nation where population growth is being driven almost exclusively by black and brown communities. And yet none of the political power is flowing there under these maps. Indeed, in many states, it gets rolled back. Alabama is a tremendous example of this. Alabama has 7 congressional districts. The state is 27% black. So that would align under what you would customarily need to do under the Voting Rights Act as far as creating minority opportunity seats to elect a candidate of their own choosing in states that have a long history of racialized, polarized voting like Alabama does. You would think that 27% would equate to 2 seats in Congress. And yet what has happened there is the kind of racial gerrymanders that Alabama lawmakers drew effectively cracks the traditional black belt of Alabama in half along Montgomery. So everything to the west of Montgomery remains in one heavily black district. Everything east of Montgomery really has been cut off and diluted into a couple of other districts. And then that district stretches, the 90 miles up to the other side of Birmingham, and it grabs every single black voter you can possibly imagine up there in order to create only one black district where there could be 2. And you see this across the South. You're seeing this in Texas, in Louisiana, in Georgia, all of these places where it would be possible to draw additional seats, and lawmakers are not.
We're talking with David Daly, New York Times bestselling author of Effed and Unrigged. Let's talk about our vote. We're talking also about how we teach Black history. There's an absolute tie between the history in which Black Americans are at the forefront. Let me put it that way, and the vote. And the vote. I mean, and what's interesting, before I go to the callers, David, you took pains in your piece. Politicians are stripping black voters of their voice in Congress. I have put it on my Facebook page, everybody, and I've tweeted it out. I urge you to go to CNN.com and read it, and come over to Santita Jackson and Friends and read it as well. The economic impact, the economic effect of not having access to your vote. You talk about the relative prosperity in the white community and the grinding poverty and underdevelopment that you see in the black community today in Alabama.
It's very true. You can't. These districts are cracked and packed and gerrymandered by putting communities together, right? And when you drive these lines, like I did. I went down to Alabama and drove these districts the same way I've driven the lines in Detroit, for example. And what you see is the same thing. You're looking at the history of racial discrimination that these lawmakers would like to say is beyond us, is in the past, but it's etched into these congressional districts. This is the history of redlining that has forced black citizens of these cities into these specific districts. You look at the kinds of economic development on one side of the line and then on the other side of the line, and it can just be completely different. In Montgomery, this map, and I include in this piece a heat map that shows Alabama and its 7 congressional district lines with the intensity and strength of communities of color. And you can see how right around the boundaries of these lines it is wildly populated black communities, and they are just hooked into this district any way they possibly can. When you see this up close, when you see the comparison of the lines and where people live, you can't look at it and be just anything less than horrified and disgusted.
Everybody, call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. And it looks like, as I go to Mama D and to Anita from North Carolina, let's start with Mama D. David, when you get down there, particularly when you get to Selma, it's almost as if time has forgotten Selma. It's virtually, it's not changed since 1965. It's like, this is unbelievable.
And I didn't make it over as far as Selma on this trip, but I did drive through all of these counties in Birmingham, in Montgomery, and then up, of course, in Shelby County, where the famous Supreme Court case started that effectively gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act.
And what did you see when you were there? Because I'm struck by the fact that Dr. King got married down there. His wife is from Marion, along with Andrew Young's wife, Mrs. Jean Young, who made her transition more than 20 years ago. I mean, they all come from these little teeny weeny places.
Yeah, I got a tour of Shelby County from a tremendous activist, the Reverend Kenneth Dukes, who runs the local chapter of the NAACP there. And something he said to me just struck me cold and has stayed with me ever since. What he said was, when they say things have changed in the South, there's only one thing that has changed in the South, only one word. He said, violence. If I try to go to the polls right now, he said, I won't get beaten. But other than that, he said, everything else here is the same.
Why do you think it's important, before I go to the callers, why do you think it's important, or do you think it's important, that we tell this part of the history, American history?
Oh, it's absolutely crucial that we tell this part of the story. The right to vote is our foundational right as American citizens. And if you don't use it, if you don't tell these stories, you will lose this right. We like to think, what's happening in Alabama right now, what's happening as far as racial gerrymandering of these maps in Texas and Louisiana, in Georgia, it is a piece of the American story that has been with us ever since the founding. This is the same argument, this is the same things that were happening here in 1619 and 1776 and 1789 and 1865 and 1878, 1965, 2013 with the decision in the Shelby County case. What we are watching right now is a continuation of a story that is as old as America about who has the right to vote, who has a voice, who has additional voice, who has extra barriers put between them and the ballot box. We did not become an actual democracy in this country until the passage of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. You take a state like Mississippi, it had 6% black voter registration in 1965. It is the Voting Rights Act that was able to finally, after decades, after centuries of slavery, of violence, of intimidation, lead to some sense of equality among black and white voter registration in states across the South. And that now is being chipped away. It's being eroded as we speak by state legislatures who are afraid of a multiracial nation and trying to hold on to power and using many of the same tricks and techniques that they have used for decades, and by a U.S. Supreme Court that has really, over the course of the last decade, taken direct aim at the Voting Rights Act and has what's left of it in its crosshairs.
Mama D from Chicago, what's your comment? What's your thought today?
Well, Hallelujah, greetings to you. I want you to think about three things when it comes to teaching Black history. First of all, what happened to Negro blacks as chattel did not happen to black and brown or anybody else. And number one, Negro blacks fought for in the Civil War while they were still slaves, because the Dred Scott decision was in effect, and it took a constitutional amendment, the 13th Amendment, to abolish slavery, not the Emancipation Proclamation. And number two, same thing during the World War II, when Negro blacks could drive a army tank overseas, but they could not drive a bread or a beer truck here at home without men like Earl M. Parton fighting for the right to do that, because we were number one in Black Blue Ribbon beer in the world, but we still couldn't drive a beer truck without the Crusaders of Justice fighting for it. And number three, it was Muhammad Ali who challenged the system of why should I go overseas and fight for people's brown people and get their freedom when I don't have freedom here at home. And so that's where we find ourselves today. In 2001, a few days before the America happened, the United Nations voted slavery a crime against humanity and recommended reparations for descendants. And that hasn't happened. We've got the March 25th will mark the 21st anniversary of the day of the International Day of Remembrance for the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. Now, how many people know about that day, or the designation from 2015 to 2024 as a decade to deal with the police killings of black men and boys, disproportionate arrests, and massive school closings that they took, United Nations took testimony at Chicago State University. How many people know about that? And isn't that part of our Black history?
It's all part of history. It's all part of Black history. It's all part of history. I have never disagreed with you on that. And I think that that's why we have to expand the voices and we have to expand the platforms, David Daly, so that all history, so that the whole scope of history can be told. And we need to understand the intersectionality of all history. I mean, Dr. Carter G. Woodson, David Daly, came up with Black History Week. He didn't just come up with it. He was from here, University of Chicago. Well, I mean, and he just said, in all of his, this is a PhD, a Harvard PhD, University of Chicago trained man. He didn't see himself in it. And Black people everywhere. We're deep in the soil in the United States. We're in the foundings of the United States. Like, you don't find indigenous history. The wealthiest group of human beings on earth at one time was a group of indigenous people in the United States. And what happened to black people in Tulsa happened to them. You got to tell it all. You got to tell it all.
You know,
A whole lot of
we
people
don't tell
have
the
been
story
hurt
of
here.
Colfax. Oh, yes. We don't tell the story of Colfax, Louisiana. We don't tell the story of Vicksburg. We don't tell the story of Wilmington, North Carolina. We don't tell the story of Tulsa, right? People don't learn about the story of Tulsa until they're watching an HBO show.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And this is part of the problem, right? You know, I mean, I have just been reading a terrific book by Nick Lehman that came out 15 years ago called Redemption, about the reaction across Mississippi and Louisiana in the years that the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were passed, but ultimately undone and undermined by a racist state constitution that took the promises that were given black people in those amendments and effectively nullified them. And we don't teach these stories. You know, I mean, it is a shameful part of our history, and we would rather just look the other way and ignore it. And we can't ignore it. I mean, I'm struck oftentimes by William Faulkner's words, right?
Oh, yeah.
The past is not dead. It's not even past.
Not even past. And that's why I love his work, because his work really, not just metaphorically, but actually deals in black and white, dark and light, darkness and light. He does that, and we have to do that. We have to do that in order for us to be whole. And if we don't, that's why we're going to lose our voting rights if we're not careful, everybody, if we're not careful. David Daly, I thank God for you and your work. Got to get the books, everybody, Rat Effed and Unrigged. And you've got to read this piece on CNN.com, trafficcnn.com, and my page as well, because I want you to hear about how black people are losing the right to vote and how Latinos are losing the right to vote. We're losing the right to vote. And soon it will be poor white people, David Daly. That's coming too. You're just going to get it later. Let's talk about Ukraine on the Santita Jackson Show back in just a minute. David Daly, before you go, you know the reason I bring poor whites into it? It's because that's where we started. You know, disenfranchised, unpropertied whites couldn't vote either. That's coming.
Vote either. No.
It's coming.
You know, I think it could be coming, but they've got it set up right now. So many of those poor whites are on their side culturally. So until
Absolutely. But when they no longer have any use for them, you are attrited.
They will be jettisoned. Yes.
Absolutely. They just need them right now. Just right now.
Yes.
Anytime Jeff Bezos says that visiting the planet Earth will be like going to Yellowstone Park, I'm like, are you serious? What? Who does that? And then you have many of the elites say, the human to animal ratio is off. What are you all talking about?
The human to animal ratio is off.
Yeah, I heard Prince William say that, and I was like, whoa, okay, because they have the conservation trust in Africa and blah blah blah. I said, you know what? This is sounding strange to me. Okay, it's all sounding, a little bizarre. And I mean, I don't see people embracing people. Okay.
That would be a good place to start in this moment.
Okay. As just embrace people. How about that? Okay. But I'm going to bring you on, and we're going to have a more an extended discussion about this, because this is I think that with Ukraine, this is going to get lost.
Everything's going to get lost.
Everything's going to get lost, but what's not getting lost is what's happening in these state legislatures all across the country. That's not getting lost. They are still keeping up. They are, as they march toward 2022 in the White House. They're doing this. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And we have to sound the alarm on it. And and I'm going to bring you on with Attorney Griggs because he was the one who said, "Look, we need an executive order on voting rights. We need that right now."
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to
Okay, I have
push that.
Dr. Whitaker ready.
Okay. And well, I'm going to let you go, David. Thank you so much. Give my love to Wyatt and your wife.
Of course. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Sending you much love. Yes.
You said she's going to be on
Right at
right at the top.
I'm going to give one or two headlines, but just bring her up so that I'm going to bring her on and off, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
And then I'll shift to the panel.
Okay.
So we can go into Ukraine, okay? Thank you so much. But just give me a verbal so I can know that you have them up, okay?
Okay.
Even before you send, okay?
Try it again.
Okay, Dr. Whitaker?
Hi, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, my dear friend. My dear beloved sister, how do you want to be introduced?
I know, right?
Yes.
You can, for this event, you can introduce me as Dr. Sonia Whitaker, National Education Policy Director for Push Excel.
Okay. 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 Okay, because I'm doing something for Chicago Teachers Union tonight also.
Are you? Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'm hosting their event. What time is, and yours is at 6:30, isn't it?
6:30 p.m. to 8 o'clock p.m.
Okay, and I'm going to let you, if you could just pitch it. Tell us what it's about. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay. All right, very good.
And because they're talking about pretty much same thing tonight. How do you teach Black history?
Okay.
That is, and you know what? I think we're going to I was with my brother Jonathan yesterday, your dear friend. And,
yes.
The thing is, we have to do what our Jewish brothers and sisters do. They have Hebrew school. My Jewish friends went to Hebrew school. And when I was growing up, I went to Breadbasket and Push. There were educators that I grew up with at Push who taught us about our history. They did that all the time. We're going to have to do it. And, give your children something to do on the weekends. That should be part of their Sunday school.
Right. Absolutely. Especially if they're not getting it where they're supposed to get it.
Well, you know what? But you're also supposed. You also have to be.
They should get it at home and school.
Yeah. Because there's some things your parents are going to tell. They give you the unedited discussion, right? And I'd like to talk with you about that because I'm like, no, there's some things that I'm not going to give my oppressor or the person who feels uncomfortable telling this truth. I'm not going to give you the power to give that to my children. I'm not going to do.
I love that, and also the first part of you said, the person that's uncomfortable with telling.
Oh yeah, truth. I'm not doing that. I mean, and Carter G. Woodson told us not to do that. When in the miseducation of the Negro, he said, "Don't do that." No.
That's right.
And don't.
I just sent you a text with.
Yeah.
I just sent you a text with the promo flyer just as a point.
Okay. Oh, I'm looking at the promo flyer, but I just want to take you right to it.
But yeah. Absolutely.
You give all these people, you give the people who hurt you all this power. That's crazy to me.
Or like
1 minute.
We stress the fact that many of them grew up in communities where there were no Black folks. And yet the teaching profession is made up of 85 to 90% white females. So given all that the media is telling them about the intellectual capability of Black children, the reality is that impacts their delivery of instruction and their assessment of intellectual capability.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so we're the ones who are going to have to.
30 seconds.
We have to take that over. Not going to give that to somebody else. And mind you, I've had some great white teachers who expected a whole lot of me.
Yeah.
But my first grade teacher, Miss Irene B. Smith, was one who kept me for 2 years. I'd been sick for a little while.
Wow.
And she said, she said, I could pass her, Reverend and Mrs. Jackson, but don't want to do that.
10 seconds.
I think I want to develop something in her. And she did that. God rest her soul. Stay right there.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world. I am free.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Thursday, February 24th, 2022. I'm Santita Jackson. Let's talk about Ukraine, everybody. Let's talk about Ukraine. What's happening over there? Call me at 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. It seems that the fighting has begun. What do you think about that? Where will America fit into all of this? What about NATO? What will happen to the people of Ukraine? What will happen to the people of Russia? What is going to happen over there? Got to talk about that on the Santita Jackson Show today. And we're talking about education. Tonight, I will be hosting a forum for the Chicago Teachers Union. Thank you, Commissioner Brandon Johnson, Stacey Davis Gates, and everybody. I just love the Chicago teachers, public school teachers. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Black history and how it should be taught. And they will be doing the same thing at Rainbow Push. And we have one of the first guests on my show, and she came in from way out in the south suburbs just to be so helpful, to be a dear sister friend to me. But she's also one of the nation's leading educators. She's absolutely brilliant. Dr. Sonia Whitaker, National Education Policy Director of Push Excel. Tonight she's got an all-star lineup. Dr. Julianne Malveaux. I mean, my goodness, you have so many people who are going to be talking, led by you and Reverend Jackson, about well, really, what are you going to be talking about? Because, Black history is something everybody's debating right now, and you're saying there really is no debate.
Absolutely. Our event tonight is entitled Redefining America's Education Agenda, Preserving Culture and Historical Perspective. And it's going to take place tonight at 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. It is virtual and it is free. And I just want to say on the front end that people can register by visiting pushexcel.org as soon as possible. We have to make sure that Black history is included in our curriculums, because Black history is American history. And the reality is that tonight's event is being hosted, much like many others, as a proactive approach, a proactive measure to make sure that the conversation remains focused on ensuring that America's classrooms are safe places for teachers to provide instructions focused on the contributions made by Black and Brown Americans.
What time is this? Because, this is a very, very important discussion.
6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. It really is, because we're living in a time right now, as we know, there's national debate about whether or not the contributions of African Americans are significant enough to be included in the curriculum. And that's problematic. That's not just problematic for Black and Brown children. That is also problematic for white students who, if they don't have the appropriate exposure to the true version of American history in their day-to-day academic experiences, they have a very skewed view of their role in this society. And so tonight we hope to combat that line of thinking by, again, encouraging those who are in positions of power to make sure that they do the right thing as it relates to preserving the culture of what some would consider to be America's most vulnerable.
And who will be with you tonight?
So tonight, this event is held for politicians, policymakers, educators, pastors, members of the clergy, members of the community, parents, and students. I have to reinforce that we're going to have a parent that speaks tonight. Her name is Ida Nelson. Ms. Santita, do you know that she actually caused a bill to be passed? It's called the Jet Hawkins Law, just effective January 1, based on the fact that her son was discriminated in the school setting specific to his hair. And so this is a law that all school districts in the state of Illinois, effective just 4 or 5 weeks ago, must adhere to. That is a form of microaggression that was demonstrated in her school. And again, if teachers had training in this area and policymakers within the school district had training in this area in particular, they would not be involved in microaggressions.
And you have Dr. Julianne Malveaux, President Emeritus of Bennett College for Women. She is now at the University of California. And who else do we have?
She is also the president of Push Excel.
Absolutely.
We have
And Judge Greg Mathis. That's right.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have Dr. Charlie Wilson, who's a professor at the Ohio State University Morton College of Law, where he teaches education law. And we also have the renowned Dr. Chike Aku, who's an assistant professor at Clark Atlanta University and the author of over 12 books.
All right. And what time can we see this tonight, and where can we go to see it?
Again, visit pushexcel.org to register for free. It will begin at 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time promptly and conclude at 8 o'clock p.m.
Dr. Sonia Whitaker, I can't wait to have you back on the show.
Thank you. I look forward to it. Keep
Sending
doing
you
the
much
work.
love. Oh, National Education Policy Director of Push Excel, but she does so much. One of our nation's leading educators, always seeking to give back. Sending you much love, my beloved sister friend, Dr. Sonia Whitaker. Everybody, let's talk about Ukraine. What do we know? What do we not know about it? What do you feel about it? What do you think about it? I want to know your thoughts, because as we have been talking about this really for the past couple of weeks, we've had like a firestorm of controversy. And some people have felt that progressives like myself are taking the wrong tack, that we are embracing Putin and not rallying around the flag. Look, I'll never have my patriotism challenged. I won't have it. Just won't have it, because there's too much that we have done in the course of living my family to make America what it's supposed to be. And I'll never, ever, ever back away from trying to promote peace. Not trying, but promoting peace. And to ask a simple question: why are we here? How did we get here? What do we know? What do we not know about Ukraine, about the conflict between the Ukraine and Russia? Well, why is the United States in NATO? I mean, this is the North Atlantic Trade Treaty Organization. This is a European construct. Why are we there? I think we should be asking these questions. We have American troops who are in Poland. Now, we keep hearing that American troops are not going to get in this. Well, no, they're already in it. They are one shot across the bow away from shooting back, and then it's on. Now you've got China, who have said, well, you know what? Russia does have a point. Their concerns about their borders are legitimate. That is the most populous country on earth with the biggest economy. I think we need to ask some questions, everybody, because this could get real big, real fast, and it's easy to start a fire, but oh my goodness, the conflagrations are very, very hard to put out. And so we have got Dwight McKee, Dr. D, brilliant social scientist, attorney Mark Fancher, National Conference of Black Lawyers, and Bryce Green, fairness and accuracy in reporting, brilliant writer. Let's start with you, Bryce. Are you surprised about the starting of this military conflict and the escalate? It appears to be escalating.
Right, and thanks for inviting me on.
Of course.
I'd first like to point out that, yeah, I am surprised. This Russian aggression is unjustified and illegal, and it's a tragedy. And I know I've been on this show, and I've expressed doubts that Putin would actually invade, because it would give the West a lot of what it wants. NATO would be strengthened, negative public opinion of Russia, and the U.S. intelligence agencies have no credibility when it comes to this thing, and German and French intelligence agencies actually disagreed with U.S. assessments of an imminent Russian invasion. And unfortunately, we were wrong, and I take full responsibility for that. Putin considers the militarized and a Western-integrated Ukraine to be worth fighting over. So now bombs are falling and people are dying, and any sane person would condemn this. But I do stand by what I've reported previously, that the U.S. absolutely pushed for this to happen. For 30 years, the United States has been pushing up against Russia. The New York Times columnist, Thomas Friedman, back in the 90s, he asked famed diplomat George Kennan, the man behind the Cold War containment strategy of the Soviet Union, he was asked about NATO expansion after the end of the Cold War. And his answer was very informative, and if you'll allow me, I'll quote it in some detail. He says, quote, "I think this is the beginning of a new Cold War. I think the Russians will gradually react quite adversely, and it will affect their policies. I think this is a tragic mistake. There is no reason for this whatsoever. No one was threatening anybody else." And Russia's democracy is as far advanced, if not farther, as those countries that we've just signed to defend from Russia. And of course, there's going to be a bad reaction from Russia. And then the NATO expanders will say that we always told you that this is how the Russians are, but this is just wrong. Now, Ken was exactly right. This is exactly what happened. The U.S. kept expanding NATO, antagonizing Russia. Ukraine was always considered, the greatest prize in the East-West rivalry. And the U.S. spent millions and millions of dollars trying to pry it from the Russian sphere of influence.
Well, hold on.
And this culminated in the 2014.
Why are they a prize? I mean, why are they so important? Because everybody appears to be trying to do business in Ukraine or fight over Ukraine. What is going on? What do they have up there in them hills?
Right. Well, Ukraine is very rich in natural resources, namely natural gas. That's one of their major economic driving forces, and it's also has a lot of fertile agricultural land. And so you've seen U.S. companies like Monsanto spend a lot of time and effort trying to closely integrate the United States and Ukraine economy, and this is actively prying it from the Russian sphere of influence. And so this sort of thing has been a trend in U.S. foreign policy. In the 90s, we bombed and carved up Yugoslavia, and in the early 2000s, we invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. So we set the stage for a world where international law doesn't mean anything. In fact, Putin is invoking a similar principle to what the U.S. invoked in their recognition of Kosovo. It was called the responsibility to protect. The U.S. said that we can bomb Yugoslavia, we can carve it up in the name of protecting these newly formed independent republics in Yugoslavia. And that is exactly what Putin says that he's doing now. The independent republics of Donetsk and Luhansk, they broke away from Ukraine after the U.S. overthrew the government in 2014. Now we're here because the Ukrainian government, along with the West, has refused to implement the peace agreement that was signed between those two countries, or between those breakaway regions in Ukraine. The peace agreement would return those regions to Ukrainian territory officially, and it would give some sort of limited autonomy for those regions. Unfortunately, Ukraine decided that they don't want to do that. They would rather hold out and perhaps take the area by force militarily. And that is Russia's justification. That's why Russia says that they're getting involved. And so when we look at this current situation, it's really important to understand the deep U.S. role in bringing this whole thing about. If we don't have that context, then we're really not understanding what's going on. You're going to see a lot of reporting about how this is a unique evil. About the Ukrainian government even tweeted out a picture of Vladimir Putin, I think, shaking hands with Adolf Hitler. And I think that's the absolute wrong way to think about this thing. We need to put it in the context of U.S. actions, of U.S. policy, and the geopolitical contest between U.S. and Russia. And there's every reason to believe that the United States absolutely believed that this would happen. In fact, a researcher at one of NATO's think tanks, the Atlantic Council, published an article in the Wall Street Journal. It was titled "The Strategic Case for Risking War in Ukraine." And the thrust of this argument was that the U.S. should refuse to negotiate with Putin, even if he has legitimate concerns, because Putin will either back down or go to war, and both of these are very good for the United States. He said that if Putin backed down, he would lose face and stature and standing in the rest of the world, which is excellent for the West. And if he went to war, well, this is good for three reasons. First, it would reinvigorate NATO, the U.S. military alliance that was formed during the Cold War and ended up expanding. Secondly, it would be an opportunity for the U.S. to crush the Russian economy by imposing extreme sanctions. Now, this, of course, furthers the U.S. goal for economically dominating the rest of the world, and it would knock out a serious regional competitor. And thirdly, it would spark an insurgency in Ukraine, which is, funded in part and supported in part by the United States and the CIA and other elements within the U.S. government. And it would spark that insurgency, which would bog down the Russians in the same way that the U.S. was bogged down in Vietnam, or the same way the USSR was bogged down in Afghanistan. In fact, this entire situation has the markings of what Zbigniew Brzezinski called the Afghan trap, which is to draw Russia into a situation where it would be bogged down and it would lose face and it would lose troops. It would lose stature in the world. And this seems to be exactly what was going on. Now, there's a lot to the 2014 coup that we supported. And that context is really important in understanding where we are today.
We're talking with Bryce Green, writer for Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, as he's giving us background to what we're seeing today. There's a context in which we're watching this crisis in Ukraine and Russia and throughout Europe. Indeed, Canada has sent troops. Bryce, there. We already have troops. The United States has troops in Poland as peacekeepers. And interestingly enough, you hear that President Putin says that he wants to, one of his goals is to defeat the neo-Nazis and the Nazis in the Ukraine. What say you about that? Bryce?
That was directed towards me?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Well, there is a very good evidence to support Putin's assertion about the neo-Nazis. Part of the 2014 coup was, in fact, led by a neo-Nazi vanguard called the Right Sector. These violent extremists, they started attacking government buildings, attacking pro-government demonstrators. In fact, the Civil War started after a neo-Nazi group locked several pro-Russian protesters in a union hall and burned it to the ground. This was in May of 2014. After that, parts of the east of Ukraine started rising up and rebelling, and then they were harshly repressed. And eventually they declared themselves independent and separate from Ukraine. And so those areas, the Donetsk Republic and the Luhansk Republic, they've remained separate from Ukraine effectively for the last 8 years. And they've been under attack. They've been under constant shelling, bombing, other attacks. Putin's justification, I wouldn't take too much stock in that. I believe that Putin's reason for going to war are geostrategic. Mm-hmm. As in, currently we're seeing, it's really hard to judge reports on the ground, especially, given all the chaos. But we're seeing a lot of military installations targeted. We're seeing air bases. We're seeing naval bases targeted. So it seems that Putin is, in fact, concerned about the Ukrainian military, and you're concerned about a hostile military force on his borders. The neo-Nazis are there, but there are also neo-Nazis in Russia, so I wouldn't put too much stock in that.
Oh, but you know what I thought he was doing?
To note is that the U.S.
I thought he was throwing a signal. Because everybody's throwing these signals. You've got President Trump, former President Trump, who's in it now. He's throwing signals. Domestic signals. And I felt that he was throwing a signal over here too.
Right.
There's a whole lot, because Americans don't have the appetite for getting involved in this. And, I see us being pulled in. It's just interesting. And what Charles Mitchell said, Putin an anti-Nazi? No, I think that there's a lot of gamesmanship here. And I think that we need to be mindful of it. There are a lot of moving parts.
Part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of this whole thing is an information war and a public relations war. The United States did support Nazis and does support Nazis and has spent billions of dollars arming the Ukrainian National Guard, which includes directly Nazi elements. That's just a fact. That might not. I don't think that's the full reason that Putin is doing what he's doing, but it definitely should be taken into account, and especially for Western audiences who are, I assume, anti-Nazi. This should be a major factor in understanding the situation in Ukraine. Just last year, there was a United Nations vote about condemning Nazism, about condemning the glorification of Nazi symbols and Nazi iconography. The only two countries to vote against that in the United Nations was the United States and Ukraine. So these are the only two countries to vote against a resolution condemning Nazism. This is noticed by the rest of the world, and Russia, as we all should know, has one of the largest anti-fascist wars of all time. You know, they bore the brunt of the Nazi assault in World War II, and they lost the most troops. And so that resonates with many people in Russia, which is, I think, one of the reasons that Putin is using it as a justification to his own people.
Everybody, I want you to call me at 773-763. WCPT 773-763-9278. What do you think about what's happening? Wow, what's happening? And we're going to talk to you about keeping your home in a hot second, and just want to hear your thoughts today, everybody. I mean, Canada is about to send troops over there, They are preparing to send troops to Russia's border. And I just knew there was something, Bryce Green. I knew there had to be gold up in them their hills. in Ukraine, I knew they had to be mineral rich. Something was going on, because that's North Korea. North Korea is sitting on a trove of trillions of dollars of minerals. So, I mean, as Dwight McKee, you say that democracy is not the end, it's a means. And so all of this stuff, we need to be clear on what's really going on here. And let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Call me, text me at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. And I want you to meet me on my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. We're also streaming on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. That's my official page, everybody. Please like me over there, and please like and subscribe to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Let's talk about Ukraine. Let's talk about it. What is going on, everybody? Well, sadly, the shooting has begun, and it's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Whenever I see war, it does something to me, and it's painful. So we need to talk about it and talk about the path to peace. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Oh, boy. Thank you, Bryce. Don't leave. And Dwight and Mark, I'm coming right to you. Mark, I'm coming to you right out of the break. And
Okay.
And then we'll get right to it. I always like to have him give us some history. Not that you don't know it, but it's a real thing. Matt?
Yep, go ahead.
Matt, I'm actually going to go right into this live read, and then, okay. And if we could ask Mrs. Wells if I can bring her on toward the end of the show.
Copy that.
Okay.
I'll give her a call right now.
Well, you know what? You can bring her on. I'll bring her on right behind the live read, but we're going to move real fast.
Okay.
Okay. Dwight?
Yes.
Okay, no, I just need to make sure that we can hear you properly. Can you just give me testing 1, 2, 3?
Hey, Dr. Mark. How you doing, Mark?
Okay, you sound great today. Mark?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks, Dwight. It's good to hear you, as always.
And you all have met Bryce Green, brilliant young writer out of Fairness and Accuracy Reporting.
Yeah, to meet you guys. Much respect.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's taken a lot of hits since he's been on the show. But, but he's rough and ready. He's one of the Rough Riders. Okay. Teddy Roosevelt, I get it. But you know what I'm saying. I'm going with the hip hop Rough Riders. How about that? With Eve. That's right. So we've got Tommy, you want to hear? You want to talk about? Okay. Chris, you disagree with how the U.S. is being portrayed in this situation? I can't wait to hear your thoughts. We'll get right to you, everybody. Call us at 773-763-9278, or you can text us at that number as well. You, D-Ray, you said China may go and back Putin. It's possible. Well, they share a border. Okay. Don't take China out of the mix. Dr. King foresaw a time that we could have a conflict with China. And that he foresaw that, Dwight, as you recall, more than 50 years ago.
Okay, Mrs. Wells is actually up and ready right now.
Okay.
If you want me to put her through.
Okay, please put her through. Chaparral? Chaparral?
I'm here.
Hey, yeah,
I'm here.
I've got to go to a live read, then I'm going to come to you very quickly because I've got to pivot because I've had a lot of people to put in
Thank
today.
you.
Okay?
All right, no problem.
Okay, so remember name, date, time, place, blah, 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 blah.
Gotcha.
Okay. Oh, Abraham, you're just the sweetest man in the world. I'm in lovey. Thank you. Charles, how you doing? And Bryce, thank you for your work. Really. And, I know you are.
Just under a minute.
Okay, I appreciate you. I really do. Because I've said to people, and I am reaching out to other voices just so that you all know. But, Malcolm Nance, for example, who's going to be on this show, he's brilliant guy. And I have a lot of respect for him and like him a lot. But his point of view is heard. The only people who you hear talking about this conflict are military people and people from the Atlantic Council and NATO and then there's Council for Foreign Relations, all of the establishment people who and the Pentagon people. The Pentagon got almost $800 billion they didn't ask for in advance of this war. Doesn't that make you curious? Some people are cheering this war on today.
10 seconds. And that caller, Chris, dropped, by the way.
Okay.
So
My main problem with why I wrote the article was mainstream media usually focuses on military and pro-NATO and
they're
U.S.
awful.
intelligence voices. And they don't have they don't.
Change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. We're talking about Ukraine. I want you to call me. Chris, call me back at 773-763. 9278 773 763 WCPT. Want to hear your thoughts about Ukraine. Want to hear your thoughts about the background that we're giving you about this conflict. Why we're here. Let me go to you, Chaparral. Chaparral, you have got a big event that's coming up. Is it March 4th?
It's March 5th, Santita.
Excuse me.
We have no problem. We have the first annual Courtney Copeland Memorial Charity Ball. It's going to be held at the experimental station at 6100 Blackstone, and we're asking everyone to come out and participate for this great charity ball. We are raising money for the Courtney Copeland Memorial Foundation to support our programs, which include our back to school program, our college scholarship program, as well as also our Christmas toy giveaway. So you can get your tickets on eventbrite.com. The keyword is Courtney Copeland Memorial Foundation, or you can donate at www.copelandmemorial.com, and you can give us a call at 708-526-4546. 708-526-4546. We appreciate your support. Thank you so much, Santita.
Blessings to you. And of course, the Courtney Copeland Foundation is honoring the memory of her son and all the wonderful work that he did in his all too brief life on earth, everybody. If you are purchasing a new home, if you are refinancing or want to refinance your existing home, if you're securing a VA loan, or if you want a reverse mortgage, or if you need to build your credit, if you need to fix your credit, if you have credit card bills that are through the roof, you need to call Team Hochberg. They can help you get through your financial difficulties, and they can do a reset on your money, everybody. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, because a lot of people need a reset on their money. Your trusted local lender, that is who they are. They can help you to keep your home. They can help you to purchase a home. A lot of us need that kind of help, particularly now. And I want you to get that help. I want you to call them at 855-563. Excuse me, 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID. I mean, you have Manny, who's a project manager. Now, he made a nice income of $70,000 a year, and he called to get pre-qualified to purchase his home. But he had a challenge. He had $20,000 of debt on his credit cards. and he did not have a down payment. So he called Team Hochberg for a free consultation. That's all you need to do. He called them for a free consultation. He didn't have enough money. He had no money for a down payment. He had $20,000 in credit card bills. And Team Hochberg created a plan for him to pay off his debt, save for a down payment so he could purchase a home. That is what he is now. He is a home owner. He spoke with Jose Rodriguez there, and they worked it all out. So he didn't qualify to purchase a home before he called Team Hochberg, and then 4 months after calling, he had resolved $20,000 of credit card debt. He had saved for a down payment, and he'd successfully purchased his new home, his first home. So I want you to do that, everybody. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or 56david.com. You can become a homeowner today, and we need to do that because many African Americans in particular are losing their homes and they're being stolen from them legally. And so they're going to help us with that. And I'm very, very excited to be working with them to make that happen. So let's see. I want to get from you. We've been listening to Bryce Green of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, helping to set the table so we can understand what we're looking at this morning as we are really watching really the winds of war just whip faster and faster and faster. Joining you, of course, is Dwight McKee, social scientist, in addition to our callers. But I want to go to you, Attorney Mark Fancher, National Conference of Black Lawyers. Indeed, you're a brilliant social critic. What do you make of this war?
Well, there's so much, but, I think that for a start, I think that Putin was beaten at his own game here. When he was dealing with Donald Trump, he really, I think, did a psychological profile on this man, and he knew that the only thing that he had to do to get him to worship, the god Putin, was to flatter Trump endlessly, to say all the things that needed to be said to appeal to Trump's gigantic ego and insecurities. And Trump fell right into the trap and began to worship Putin, just as he had planned. I think on this occasion, the U.S. has figured out how to push Putin's buttons, and they began quite some time ago to lay the groundwork for what we are now witnessing, causing him to get to the point where his testosterone goes into overdrive and he strikes out and engages in all of this type of aggression. Because it all appears in a context. Bryce Green laid it out very well. I mean, we have to remember that Ukraine democratically elected a government. Viktor Yanukovych was the head of state back in 2014. But because the Obama administration, which is part of the one party with two names, decided that they needed to get control of the world, specifically that region of the world, they pumped billions of dollars into Ukraine for the purpose of overthrowing a democratically elected government there and putting in place a regime that has been referenced, included many unsavory elements, including neo-Nazis. And there were regions of the Ukraine, in the eastern part of the country that spoke Russian, that resisted. They did not like the idea that their government had been overthrown, and they essentially began to effectively try and secede. And when the regime struck back at them, it was necessary for negotiations to take place, which resulted in a peace treaty called the Minsk Accords in 2015, which allowed for the autonomy of the Donbass region, and it gave the Ukraine regime the opportunity to reclaim sovereignty of other eastern regions in the country. But nevertheless, the aggression against the Donbass region continued to persist. And it was that it appears triggered Putin to begin this military buildup, because he saw the writing on the wall. He knew that the worst thing that could happen is that the regime would get total control of Ukraine, and it would be in a position not only to become part of the NATO machine, but it would have territory right on the border of Russia that it could use for, installing military capacity to invade if necessary. So he panics and he begins to think that they're trying to come right up to my doorstep. They're trying to militarize this region so that they can come in and to take it by force. And so he begins to respond as anybody would expect, that, he wants to defend his borders. But in the last few weeks, if not months, he's been baited, with all the rhetoric and all the predictions and all the things that the U.S. has been saying. They've driven this thing to a fever pitch. And I think that as the time has gone on, Putin has probably said, these people are dead set on coming into my country. They're determined to get it. And so it's better to take a stand now and to go ahead and if we're going to fight, let's get it on. And so, that, as I said, the testosterone is in overdrive now. You think you're tougher than I am. I'm going to show you I'm tougher than you are, and let's fight. And the rest of us, the rest of the world suffers because of it. And it's all because of the megalomaniacal imperialist drive of the U.S. And, while I'm sure interested in the natural gas reserves in Ukraine and everything else, bottom line, they just want to control the planet. And they'll do anything to do it, anything. And we need to all know that, so that we are not just mindless pawns who are responding to stimuli and all the messages that are coming from the propaganda machines from both countries.
Because they're awfully excited about the war. I call it war porn, unfortunately. I mean, why would you send your A team of reporters to a war zone? I don't understand that. I mean, that is and you're waiting for the shots to be fired. They've been waiting for weeks. Dwight McKee, before we go to the callers, your thoughts?
Well, in order to understand this situation, you have to understand what Europe is and how Europe operates. And the history of Europe is that white people, Europeans are only white over here. In Europe, there are tribes. Europe is basically 10 tribes, the Vandals and the Vikings and the Ostrogoths and the Franks. And they spent the last 3,000 years surviving by invading each other. That's the history of Europe, these tribes fighting back and forth for control. Then once the war is over, they get married and set these royal families up. And these royal families marry based on the map and make political alliances. They go back to war, and then after the war, they have these conferences and these treaties. And in these treaties, they redraw the boundaries every 50, 100 years. But they redraw the boundaries around geographical and military interests rather than ethnic interests. And so you have all these overlapping geographical situations where one ethnicity is locked into a relationship or at the proximity with other ethnics that are not family, but now they're all the same country. Like you would take a country like the Slavics and draw that into 4 different countries, Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia. And so what happens is that after the last 2 wars, after the conference of Berlin, the conference of Versailles, and the conference after World War II, Roosevelt and Stalin and Churchill sat down and drew all these artificial boundaries that coming out of World War I, where they had done the same thing, that locks in the Russians into the sphere of the Germans, or locked the Palestinians into the sphere of the British. And so now what you have is all of these countries trying to realign themselves and pull back into their sphere their own ethnic groups. And so what you're looking at now with this situation in Ukraine is part of Ukraine really was Russian. And there are Russians living there, and they speak Russian. Actually, Russia started in Kyiv. It was in Kyiv before it was in Moscow. And so you have these remaining groups that now the Russians have decided that they want to reclaim, bring them back in their sphere of influence. But the other group, who are also bonded by military interests and financial interests, they are resisting that because now they got skin in the game. Now they get their oil from the Ukraine. Now they have mining rights in Ukraine. And so they're still fighting over territory, and they're still fighting over natural resources, but it's now institutionalized. So you have institutions like Nato, who is a legitimate institution that their role is to protect their interest in these conflicts. You have the Russians who are trying to reclaim their territory in these relationships. You have the United States, who is a European construct, who all these ethnic groups have gathered in one country, the United States, but all of them politically operate in their own nationality's interests, who push us into these wars and push us into these alliances. So in many ways, we really are pawns in the game. The other part of this conflict, I think, and I'll be very quick is, I think that part of this is a strategy by Putin to set Trump back up as the president, because they want to show Biden is weak and Trump has been the only one who can resolve this issue. So I think he'll take the 2 or 3 territories that used to belong to Russia, Ukraine. I don't think he's going to start a major war, and I think they'll turn Biden into the weak guy and say the only one that can really save the planet is Trump. Trump will get together, cut a deal, give them back the rest of the Ukraine, pull us out of NATO, and happy days be here again for the Russians. That's what I see.
We will see. Let me go to some of these calls because a lot of people have a lot to weigh in on. I mean, there's a lot that they want to say. Chris, what's on your mind today? Chris?
Good morning, Santita.
Good morning.
Great discussion as always.
Thank you.
So I got a couple thoughts. As American progressives and not like Democratic Party operatives, but as actual progressives, I take issue with some of the framing on this very show, which is my favorite morning show, and has been a blessing to me, my mom, and my family. The thing is, to deny America's involvement in any of these conflicts will be foolish. America is on the world stage on every level, and economically, militarily and otherwise. So, and I would also like to compliment Bryce Green on his article that he shared on Twitter, which was outstanding. Very good article, and it did give a lot of insight into Nato expansion. I appreciated that. With that being said, 2 issues that I would like to bring up is one, that Nazism vote in the UN was essentially based on Russian propaganda. First of all, that they were using to, that's one of the Russians' favorite tools is to frame any type of opposition as a sort of as Nazis, which plays well in their country with their hatred of Nazis in post-World War II, but also in places across the world that don't read into their misinformation. There's Nazi movements from Sweden to Pine Bluff, Arkansas, to Russia, to Kiev, everywhere in between. So that's sort of a foolish thing in and of itself. Then my second point is that I believe his name is Martin Kimani, and it was going around the news a couple of days ago that before the UN, he gave a speech, and he's the Kenyan ambassador to the UN. And he framed this in a way that I haven't really heard yet, but I deeply appreciated it, which respectfully disagrees with the great Dwight McKee on his analysis, which is that the blood and soil mentality of these are my ethnic people means nothing. We are in a I guess not necessarily a post-Cold War world, but there are countries that were built arbitrarily by London, Lisbon, Paris. This is a reality. And countries, no matter how they were created, if they choose to live in peace, they're allowed to defend themselves, their interest in their borders. And he framed it as a post-colonial issue. What I personally think is a big part of this that isn't really seemingly being discussed is that Vladimir Putin perceives this part of the world as his father and grandfather's legacy, much like, little baby Bush did with Iraq. And it's a personal ego trip that is going to get people killed. And I think that that's an important thing to remember is that in a colonial mentality, this is Vladimir Putin trying to control and take over Ukraine, which, regardless of its history from hundreds of years ago, does have a unique culture, has a language which, frankly, is dying out to Russian. But there's an ethnic difference as well as a cultural difference between Ukraine and Russia, depending on where you are in Ukraine. So I think it's important that we frame these things like that. And while I appreciate all of the deep insight that all of your panel always bring, I think that constantly blaming America is a bad look. It's fair in certain instances.
But Chris, it's not blaming America. Hold on. It's not blaming America. It's having America take responsibility. You've got to get out of this country. See, I've spent a lot of time out of the United States. And a lot of people have a lot of different opinions. I mean, black people were brought here on a foreign policy. And I got an opinion about that. And so it's not blaming America, and we can't be so prickly and so high and mighty that we can't take the criticism. What is that? We've got to be mature enough to take criticism, to be able to critique ourselves. If we get if you criticize them, that's why we can't teach black folks in American history, indigenous people in American history, because, oh my goodness, if you tell the truth, you tell the truth, and you might actually heal somebody, we might be able to move forward. America doesn't need the blame. America needs the responsibility for the things that they've done. The first time America dropped a bomb, first time we had a bomb dropped on American soil, America did it. And they did it to black people. And we need to tell that story. That happened in Tulsa. That's not blaming America. That's having America, shame on you, and take responsibility, and let's move forward, and let's move upward. We've got to do that.
That's absolutely the
truth. And America
and
has done a lot of great things in the world, Chris. And America has done some things that they need to rectify. They need to. They're the ones who helped to get. They got Mandela imprisoned. They did that when he was the president. When he was on the terrorist watch list because he was considered to be a terrorist as a Nobel Prize winner, who was the president of a sovereign nation. I mean, come on now. Come on, honey. We've got to tell the truth.
That's bad. But this is my point, and I couldn't agree more. The truth will absolutely set us free.
Yeah.
Empiricist history of America is a stain on world history. I couldn't agree with you more. All I'm trying to say is that while we point out the realities of bringing it back to Ukraine, certainly not to disagree with anything you said, because you are very worldly, and I
no. You don't have to give me any of that. You can disagree. You can disagree because you have the same 24 hours in your day that I do, and I respect that. I'm just saying to you that I hear you, but you got to frame it the way you frame it. The thing is, the people of Ukraine and all of these different groups that they have there, they have an opinion. We're not hearing that, Chris. We're not. We're not even talking to all the Russian people. That's a mistake. That's a mistake. All people need to be heard.
The Russian people are pretty against it, and the Ukrainian people.
We don't know that because we have not talked to a whole lot of them. They have. I mean, there's some people who are against it. Some people support it. I think we need to have that discussion. Hold on, Chris, because we're going to talk a little bit more about this on the other side of the break on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. But I only have a couple minutes before I have to go, and I literally need 30 seconds from each one of my guests. And you can stay here, Chris, because I want you to engage them, because I think what you're saying is important. And if you all want to get in on this discussion, you better call me real quick at 773-763-9278. We're going to talk on the Santita Jackson YouTube channel for about 10 or 15 minutes. Not too long, but long enough for you to be heard. Dwight, 30 seconds. What are you hearing from Chris?
Yes. You have to understand Russia, Chris. Russia is not a a one people. Russia is the United States of Russia. The USSR, they are an amalgam of different ethnic groups that most of them speak Russian. But again, you have to understand how Europe works. These royal families have intermarried and set their own kingdoms up. This is a family feud. And so the Spencers are a German family.
The Queen's family, they're German. The Spencers are actually English. Yeah.
Yeah, the rest of the communists overthrew the Romanovs, which was a family structure within a marriage with the Habsburgs.
Okay, hold on.
And they divided.
Now hold that thought, because it's a family fight. Stay right here, everybody. 30 seconds from you, Mark Fancher, Attorney Mark Fancher.
Yeah, the U.S. always holds itself out as the champion of democracy. All was fine in Ukraine in 2014. A democratically elected government was in place. There was no conflict, and the U.S. pumped billions of dollars into that country to overthrow democracy, and it started the whole sequence of events that leads us to this point. The person that starts it takes responsibility. In this case, it's a country, and that country is the U.S.
Bryce, 30 seconds before we go to the Santita Jackson YouTube channel.
Right. I agree with all of that. And to Chris's point about this being a personal vendetta for Putin, I'd have to disagree with that. I'd say that I'd agree with more what George Kennan said earlier in the 90s, the famed diplomat. He said that no Russian leader, no matter who they are, would tolerate or a hostile military alliance right on their border. And that's exactly what the United States tried to do with Ukraine. And they knew this. They knew that this would eventually lead to some sort of conflagration. And so I do think that the U.S. has a significant degree of responsibility. Putin obviously has a great degree of responsibility. But since we're in the United States, we need to look at our role. We need to look at how we pushed him and how it was deliberate policy choices that backed Putin into a corner, in his view, and led to where we are now.
And you know what? I just say no to imperialism. I believe that everyone should be able to be sovereign. And people should not be invaded. People should not be overthrown. We need to get out of everybody's business. You know what? If you want democracy, let's fight for it right here. Let's do that. And all of those trillions of dollars of minerals that Ukraine has, that belongs to them. And let them work that out. If anything, we should come in as peacemakers. We will be blessed if we do that. Think about that, everybody. Stay right here. Going to get some closing thoughts on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. I can't wait to be with you tomorrow. God bless everybody. All righty. Okay, you guys. Is Chris still there?
He is. Tommy dropped, though, but I'll put Chris back through.
Okay. But why don't you just more extensively, Mark, can you speak to Chris? I mean, because Chris, I think you have your thoughts are legitimate, whether I agree with them or not. I mean, this is at some point, I don't understand how America cannot take criticism. I don't get that. I don't understand that. I don't.
I don't think it's a matter of criticism. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that while we absolutely criticize America's involvement, expansionism, imperialist mentality, we also must be clear-eyed about the same from other people. You know what I'm saying? Like, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere type of mentality. So Vladimir Putin is absolutely a blood and soil imperial mentality, and you just said it at the end of the show.
No, wait. I'm not doing that. All you have to do is look. I've been to Africa so many times. Wait a minute. You go to Africa, China, it's not benevolence. Everybody's trying to take over Africa's resources. Everybody's doing it. And I'm saying all of that thinking is wrong. But when America's in the wrong, I should criticize it. It's my country. Nobody is justifying President Putin. Nobody's doing that. But to say that America has a role in this mischief, see, that's part of the problem with Black history. We don't want to tell the whole story. We got to tell it all.
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, trust me. I'm just trying to. You could not be more right.
I could be wrong.
Yeah, can I suggest something here?
Yes.
Can I suggest something?
Sure.
It may be that Putin and a number of other parties are doing things that they shouldn't do, but ultimately I use schoolyard logic. When I was in the 8th grade, I was in an arts and crafts class, and there was a certain point when the teacher decided to leave the classroom, and I was bored, and so I took a ball of clay and I threw it with dead aim and hit the head of a kid that I regarded as a nerd. He jumped up and, who did that? Who did that? And for some reason, he decided that it was another kid who threw it. And so he goes over to the guy and starts pushing on him. This guy grabs him, and then the kid I threw the clay ball at hit him, which caused the other kid to freak out. They start rolling around on the floor. The whole classroom is in total chaos. Desks are overturned. Everything is just a mess. And the teacher comes back and takes one look at it. She was a cool customer, and she just quietly went from person to person asking what happened, and she worked her way back to me, and I confessed what I did. She excused all of the other students, including the 2 kids who were engaged in the scuffle, and she made me clean up the whole room because I started it. I'm the one that was responsible for the whole thing. Yes, those other kids shouldn't have been pushing each other and biting each other and things, but I laid the foundation for that. I caused the conditions that started it. And that's what's happening here. None of this would have happened. I mean, there's so many conflicts and so many wars around the world in different parts of the world that the U.S. conceivably, if they were on the level about trying to keep peace and all of that kind of thing, they could intervene if they wanted. But they strategically chose this, and they created the conditions that were designed to cause conflict. And so now they're the ones that are responsible ultimately, in the same way that I was ultimately responsible, because had I not thrown that clay ball, none of those other things would have happened.
But where this started, Mark, where this started, Mark, is that after World War II, Roosevelt and Stalin and Churchill sat down and divided Germany into 2 pieces. I was in Germany when after this happened. In the 2 pieces, East Germany and West Germany. They gave East Germany to the Russians and West Germany to the West, and said that, that even though they're the same country, that there'll be 2 different governments, the people will belong to 2 different spheres of influence. Then in the 80s, and again, I was in Germany when this happened, Germany wanted to be reunited. They cut a deal to say with Russia to say, if we allow you all to reunite Germany without a war, that you all would promise us that NATO would never expand into the West, into the East. And what the United States agreed to that, and then they broke that treaty. And they tried to put NATO right next door to Russia with all of the missiles and all of the military, the same way the Russians tried to do with Cuba with Kennedy. And so just like Kennedy said, we cannot have weapons next door to us, you all cannot have weapons next to Russia. And if you try to expand into NATO, we're going to war. And he's been telling them that. This ain't new. He's been telling them that for the last 10 years. Don't try to expand into NATO. And the Ukraine is saying we want to be part of NATO because our interest is trying to deal with, we were trying to come westernized. And so these things go back, some of these fights go back hundreds of years, and many of them are ethnic conflicts that we get drawn into because many of those ethnics have moved over here to the United States, but they still have familiar ties, and they run our politics, and they draw us into their ancestral fights. We don't really have a dog in the fight, but we end up in the war. At least the black Americans do, because those are not our families, but these are Trump's family. These are Biden's family. Biden did have a dog in the fight between England and Ireland and helped support the Irish Liberation Army. These are ethnic battles that we get drawn into.
Bryce, and when you get over there, people ask about their backgrounds. People, when you get to England, it is not lost on the British people that President Biden is part Irish. It's not lost on them. And we need to understand all of these pieces. Bryce, I'm sorry.
All right. The way I think about this issue, the way I approach this issue is as a geostrategic, economic, and military conflict, right? The whole reason that Ukraine is so important to Russia is because it is, for lack of a better term, in its sphere of influence. I've heard it said that Russia is trying to assert that it has its own Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine is a U.S. policy that says that all of South and Central America is, the territory of the U.S. It was designed to prevent European powers from colonizing it, and so the U.S. could colonize it. Well, essentially, that's what Russia's doing on a lot smaller scale, and he has a lot more of a case to say that Ukraine is strategically important to Russia than the United States does in saying that something like Venezuela or Panama has strategic importance to the United States. And so when the United States threatened this security by expanding NATO throughout the 90s, early 2000s, and when the United States set the precedent for something called the responsibility to protect, where the United States has the right to intervene militarily if it believes that the interests of a minority group are in danger. Putin is invoking a version of that principle to justify attacking Ukraine. And these principles didn't exist before the United States. And so I believe that we need to focus more on the United States' role in driving this conflict than Putin. Your point about Putin being a bad guy and that Russia's not good. I think that's basically what your point boils down to. That yes, the U.S. is bad. Yes, this is the U.S.'s fault, but we shouldn't sanitize foreign leaders just because they're anti-American. And that's true. That's true. But I mean, our emphasis as progressives, as people opposed to United States imperialism, as people living in the United States, well, there's really only one credible target for our ire. Like, we do not live in Russia. We can criticize Russia all we want. Imagine if a Russian started criticizing the U.S. We'd be like, okay, well, great. I mean, you can't really do anything about it. But here in the United States, we have some degree of power. We have some degree of control that our awareness grants us. And the more aware we are, the more we can make more political decisions to prevent this sort of thing from happening in the future.
I agree. I just want us to understand as much of this issue as we can. I mean, that's the only way that we're going to get through this and through these other conflicts. You can't just know one side. You can't. You got to know it all, or as much as you can learn. And you need to have the proper context. And you need to understand this is not just, Dwight and Mark and Bryce, when I read what I already thought was going to happen when China has weighed in, they said now Russia has a point. This is the most populous nation on earth with the biggest economy, and they are growing. Biggest economy in the world, China. China is not some sleeping giant. They are awake, everybody. I don't want to fight with them. I'm not afraid of one, if I'm right. But, what are we doing? What are we doing? And more people are saying that this is making Biden look strong, as if getting out of Afghanistan when people didn't want us there made him look weak. The media fell out of love with him when he left a war. Do you not get it? Dr. King imperiled his life by going against the Vietnam War. Desegregation, Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, okay. He was controversial in all of that. But when he stepped into this hornet's nest called Vietnam and the military industrial complex, he was killed a year to the day, to the hour, to the minute that he announced his opposition to the Vietnam War. Do you not get it? John F. Kennedy, he was trying to get out of Vietnam. He had signed the papers to do so. That's a problem. And not just that, Cuba. He did not want war with Cuba. He was working it out with Khrushchev. Come on. People who don't want war, they are a problem. And we need to look at that and deal with that. And you need to figure out whether you want to study war no more or study more of it. I can't make it personal. Every one of these leaders, Bryce and Mark and Dwight, have big egos. I'm over that. And that's between them and the Lord. And I hope that they work it out. Really. Because no one controls the world but God, absolutely, at the end of the day. At the end of the day. Because we're all going to die and trot off this mortal coil. So getting over someone's personality and look at Putin and everybody's got a big ego. I mean, our president ran to be president for 40 years. Come on, y'all. Get over that. Let's deal with the issues at hand. How are we going to stop the killing, which has already begun? No one should lose their lives. I mean, we're trying to figure out why, what's going on here. And no one really, really looked for a peaceful solution to this. And that, to me, is more disturbing than all of this.
Can I make a point on that?
Oh, please.
Because that cannot be stressed enough. I mean, in the fall, when the Russian troop buildup started, Putin was immediately clear about a path to de-escalation. He said, I want a guarantee that NATO will not expand to Ukraine and that missiles, U.S. military bases, and U.S. soldiers will not be this close to my border. Well, what was the Biden administration's response? The response was to laugh it off. The response was to say that this is ridiculous. These are non-starters. We have the right to be at your border. We have the right to point missiles at your head. We have the right to station troops directly across your border. Imagine if Russia asserted its right to station military bases in Canada after overthrowing its government. Imagine if they asserted the right to have a ballistic missile station in Mexico after they fueled a right-wing uprising. Imagine how the U.S. would react. And it's important to stress that Putin has shown a tremendous degree of restraint over the last 8 years regarding these breakaway republics. The Minsk agreements, which was alluded to earlier, they were signed in 2015. Russia agreed to it. France agreed to it. Germany agreed to it. Ukraine agreed to it. And yet, when it came to implementing it, Ukraine refused. They said, no, we refuse to implement these accords until these rebel groups disarm, which was not part of the agreement, which was not a part of it was not part of the text. And so they decided to say, hey, we're just going to leave it there. We're going to leave this civil war at a stalemate. And those republics, they went to Putin. They asked, can you recognize us? Can you recognize us? And then we will invite Russian troops in so we can, secure our borders. Putin said, no, I want this to be dealt with peacefully. The Minsk Accords are a good framework. We should stick with it. And that was his position for 8 years. 8 years. All the while, the United States was pouring billions and billions of dollars into the Ukrainian military. Yes, that includes those far-right neo-Nazi groups. And it also includes threats against the Russian pipeline that they had with Germany, the Nord Stream 2. Now, once the U.S. heard the fact that Russia was staying out of this, well, then you started seeing shelling. You started seeing more shelling in the Donbas region. If you look at the European Security Agency, they have daily reports on the number of explosions that are happening in this hot area. And if you look at the map for the last, couple weeks, the vast majority of the explosions are in the Donbas territory, are in those breakaway republics. In other words, they are coming from Ukraine. So Ukraine started attacking these things. And so only then did the troop buildup start. Only then did Putin attack. Only after Biden refused to negotiate. And so that can't be stressed enough.
And Mark, after they made it part of the German negotiation, I mean, they had already agreed that if Russia allowed them to East and West Germany to reunite, that they wouldn't contest that. So they allowed for peaceful reconciliation of East and West Germany under the pretext as part of negotiation that NATO would not expand into to the borders of Russia. And so it was the United States, NATO, and the Ukraine, the government that was in Ukraine, that violated that treaty.
Exactly. So, in other words, the U.S. violated the treaty twice. The U.S. refused to do any serious negotiations twice. And so now we're here. Now, again, I want to stress that no one here agrees with what Putin is doing. Ideally, there would be a diplomatic solution. But if you were Vladimir Putin and you didn't want NATO at your border, what are your options? You have to ask, what are your options? You're dealing with the United States, who notoriously is a terrible negotiating partner.
Well, and
even when they make agreements, they don't stick to them.
Well, and now you've got
to even make an agreement.
And now it appears that you have China agreeing with you. Are you okay?
Yeah, exactly. The biggest economy in the world by purchasing power parity.
That is continuing to grow. The most populous nation on earth. Hey, everybody, come on. It's not as simple as the United States is. The United States. The days are over of the days of the United States getting their way, my way or the highway. That's done. It's done. I'm trying to figure out a way to keep us safe, for us not to have cyber attacks, for someone not to attack our grid. We need $20+ trillion to get our infrastructure together. We can barely get $2. Do you know how vulnerable we are in the United States? Do you have any idea?
And what the United States is looking at Ukraine are those oil fields. The reason they don't want Ukraine to be under the sphere of influence of Russia is because they see these major companies see an opportunity where they can own and privatize these oil fields.
Well, and also it opens up another kind of relationship with the rest of the EU. Okay? Now you have a United States of Europe. With them having to go direct, with Germany having to deal with Russia to get their oil, they're going to have a good relationship with them. And then that other states will follow. Other nation states in Europe will follow. That's going to be a different day. Part of the advantage of the United States is that we are United States of America. We are an entire subcontinent from sea to shining sea.
Yeah, but the United States is the United States of Europe.
Yeah, of course it is.
These are these European tribes who all come together and agreed on one political philosophy. And relationship remain.
But we don't see
and so
that.
They are broken down into ethnic groups. These administrations ethnic interests. And so one of the reasons that white people have a hard time voting for Kennedy is because they say that we vote for Kennedy or Biden or any Catholic, that the Pope will be in charge of the country because they feel their allegiance was still to the Catholic Church and to the papacy. Is we have to understand how America works. They only come together as one people when it comes to the oppression of blood. But until then, they still maintain their ethnic or connections in diversity.
Well,
the name of Minnesota's football team is the Vikings.
Well, that's why Kennedy's father becoming the ambassador to the court of St. James was such a big deal, because he was a generation or two away from being an Irishman. I mean,
the name of the Boston's basketball team are the Celtics.
Yes.
The name of Minnesota's football team are the Vikings. they still maintain these ethnic connections.
That having been said, I want to give you all final thoughts because, of course, I gotta run and do a couple of other things here. Love you all, but I gotta get it moving today. Tonight, I'm gonna be hosting an event for the Chicago Teachers Union as we talk about critical race theory. Really, how are we gonna tell the truth about everybody in the United States of America, starting with Black people? Okay, so I want to get closing thoughts. I don't know if Mark is still there. I don't know who's still here, but really a minute apiece for everybody because I need to shut this down. Mark, are you still there? Okay, Dwight, 1 minute for you.
Yeah, I think that in order to understand these relationships, you have to understand history. Is that the Russians overthrew the Romanovs. The Romanovs was the niece and nephew of Victoria, who was the Queen of England. The Tsar of Germany at the time was Willie, they used to call him, Kaiser Wilhelm. Many of these are family feuds that when Germany fights England, who fights the French, is the family, the royal family of England was first a French family, the Normans. These are relationships that go back hundreds and thousands of years where they've had ethnic marriages and ethnic wars. And so all of this is, you put all this together and you stir it up and you get Europe. And so every 50 years, Europe has a major cleansing and a redrawing of boundaries. And so when we talk about democracy, we talk about capitalism, these are economic systems, but you're really talking about ethnic groups that are trying to realign themselves around nationalistic boundaries rather than geographical boundaries. And we as Black Americans get swept up in the hype because we don't know the history. We don't win when they win, but we lose when they lose. And we have to understand much better of what we're dealing with because we only end up pawns in somebody else's game.
Well, Bryce, your closing thoughts?
Right. Well, my closing thoughts are this. Like, if we want to better understand our foreign policy, we need to understand how the U.S. has contributed to a system of lawlessness, of violence, and of destruction around the world. If we had, say we didn't expand NATO, say we didn't start bombing countries left and right, say we didn't invade Iraq and Afghanistan, say we didn't bomb Libya, there would be a lot more moral force in our condemnation of Russia. In fact, very likely, none of this would have ever happened because we could have created a stable order. We could have enforced international law, but we chose not to. We chose expansion, and this is not good for anybody. This imperils the security of every nation around the world. And when the language of the world is force, you can't be surprised when other nations around the world use it too. I saw someone say that Americans are always surprised when other countries start to act like America. And that's very true because Russia is doing something that America has done, supported, is currently supporting right now. In fact, if you look at the casualty totals, you don't know too much about them. You don't know how accurate they are. But even as a first approximation, these casualty totals in the last 12 hours are less than a similar operation in Gaza back in 2008 when Israel started bombing the Gaza Strip. They instantly killed around 200 civilians, and they targeted civilians. And this is documented by Human Rights Watch, the United Nations, Amnesty International. This is the sort of thing that the U.S. supports. And we cannot act surprised when other countries do it. If we really are against this sort of thing, we are against war, if we are against violence, the most important thing that we can do is to stop participating in it.
Be what we say we want to be and be who we really believe that we are. Blessed are the peacemakers. They shall inherit the earth. They can, but we can't do it like this. And I'm not going to back down off of that. And I am going to reach out to some other voices. I mean, really, look, I mean, it's amazing. If I were beating the drums of war, I think I would get a very, very different reaction here. And that saddens me, but it's okay. I can live with it. I can live with it. That having been said, I'm going to hold on to peace if I'm the last one in the room. I'm going to do that. And look at it, and everyone needs to take responsibility for what they do. For what you do. And we're not going, things are not going to be right until we do that. But they're not going to be right. You can't just sit around here and act like we've not hurt people's feelings. Like we've not had coups. You can't do that. Not when we're spying on Black Lives Matter today. Not on, wait a minute, we're not dealing with the white terrorists who frighten the heck out of everybody here. No. We spy on the peace movement. You saw that in Michael Moore's movie, Fahrenheit 9/11, wasn't it? We spy on the peace movement, not on the warmongers, on the peace movement. We do that today in the United States. Black activists, we're spying on them today in the United States. And that's not blaming the United States, that is just fact. Take responsibility so we can get out of this mess. Aren't you tired of not having a peace dividend? Aren't you tired of that? Aren't you tired of spending all of this? This war is going to take food off of your table and money and food out of your baby's mouth. Many children are being denied a computer. We could have computers for free. Apple is a $1 trillion company. We've invested so much in war, we can't invest in people. It's wrong. We'll never survive this. We're not going to survive going down this path. We have all of these prophets who've come before us and they've told us so. It is true. Look at America. America's struggling. Have you seen Dubai lately? Have you seen pictures of that city? Oh my gosh. Hey. America's infrastructure is more than 100 years old. Come on, everybody. I don't want to do better. I want to do right. Charles, guns are butter. That's right. And we're giving money to guns, and we don't have butter. It's not going to work. I'm telling you, everybody, that is not going to work. That's a non-starter. So I'm sending you all much love. Bryce, thank you so much for being with me. Dwight McKee and in absentia. Thank you, Mark Fancher. You all are the best. And thank you, Morning Stars. It's always a joy to be with you. Whether we agree or disagree, I love engaging with you. And I'm honored that you share this time with me and with each other. What a blessing you are. I love you. And thank you, Matt, for a great show. Thank you, Matt. Everybody, have a great day. Mwah. Love you. See you tomorrow morning on the Santita Jackson Show. God bless you all. Is Mark still there? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. I'm going to let you all go. I'm gone. Love you. God bless. Bye-bye.